normally don't go away right away. I'm gonna say bye then. Okay. So we're live. Hello, Kai. How are you?
Great, Georgi, and looking forward to this. This has been many months in preparation.
Yeah, since we met twice already. Once in New York, once in Frankfurt. I know you have a very busy schedule. So first of all, I want to thank you very much for your time. Let's discover who is Kai-Uwe Bergmann. So I'm very curious. Why did you decide to become an architect? And I know indirectly that you have a very international background between Denmark, the US, Germany. So if you can briefly explain that.
Yes, I think as with so many others, it probably started with a set of Legos, and being able to sort of build these fantastical worlds, with just, a common brick. And then I think if you add also my parents at a very early age traveled to many different places with me. And in those travels, I would always be going inside cathedrals and castles and looking at public markets. And so I would find these kind of almost communal spaces and cathedral-like spaces as so awe-inspiring. So from that very moment, I was trying to think of how could I be involved in the creation of these kinds of spaces. And so even as a teenager, I very quickly discovered architecture and what an architect does. And throughout my high school, and then as soon as I could, attended college, started working in the summers for architects. And that's how I sort of started into the profession.
That sounds very interesting. It's a very interesting that you were impressed by those castles. I started with Lego too, but that's more or less the common ground. And you studied also in the US, right? Because you're licensed in the US. So how come you moved from Europe to the US?
Yeah, so I am German by birth. My family did sort of wander off in my mom's generation and my dad's generation. They went to discovered other parts of the world. And so I do have family in Scandinavia and Sweden and Sydney, Australia, and many parts of Europe, and also in the United States. So we immigrated to the United States in 1976. We actually came across the Atlantic on the QE2, and my first sighting of the United States was the Statue of Liberty, standing on the top deck of the QE2, Queen Elizabeth II. And then that ship actually docked at the Chelsea Piers on the west side. And some family members came to pick us up and took us to their home in Connecticut. So from that moment on, really from 76, America has been my home. And I have both taken all my schooling, high school and universities here. I did attend University of Virginia for my undergraduate and the University of California, Los Angeles for my graduate. That was to just sort of enjoy the two coasts, East Coast and West Coast, very different mentalities. And once I finished 6 years of my education, I felt really that I had not yet worked or done anything. I could theorize and I could kind of talk a lot about architecture, but I wasn't necessarily making or doing it. So I set forth on a sort of 3-year apprenticeship where I apprenticed as a stonemason, as a carpenter, as a glassblower, to really understand and get a feel for all the materials that are architecture.
That's also very very cool, because here in Germany you're kind of like you have to do it. You have to do an apprenticeship in the on the construction site while you're studying. So it's very important, in my opinion, too, to have this understanding of what is the construction site and the materials and how things are built. And in this whole story, when did you join the architectural world, and how did you join BIG? Because you're one of maybe the earlier Bigsters, or did you join already along the way?
Yeah, so it was actually a German author, Hermann Hesse, who wrote Narzissmus and Goldmund, where I learned about Auf der Walz. It's the German kind of thought of journeyman architect. And so once I completed all of these different apprenticeships, I then actually settled in Seattle for a number of years, and I started my architectural life there with a smaller regional office, but very sort of modern in language, called Ed Weinstein or Weinstein Copeland, and that was a really good start. A great mentor, and still a very important office in the Seattle area. I did have a German passport, and I had done all of these travels, so I was still itching to actually go to Europe and to try to do architecture and practice architecture there. So I took my portfolio in a backpack and I set forth. I interviewed for about 3 months in about 6 different countries, and the place that I actually did discover and found work, that was in Vorarlberg, which is in Austria. And I worked for a couple of years at Baumschlager and Eberle Architects. Some of you might know them. And those were some great years because they were known as Baukünstler, or sort of architect craftsmen. And they had this love of material and love of making that I also shared. So I worked there for a couple of years. And then it was actually love that sent me up north to Scandinavia. And I moved to Copenhagen in 2004, where I then basically was looking for work. And there were very few offices at that time that were kind of doing work outside of Denmark. I also, of course, needed to learn Danish, the language, in order to even be productive. And so those first couple of years, I learned the language. I met Bjarke for the very first time in the Venice Biennale. And I encourage everybody to go to those opening days in the Venice Biennale. It's a great time to meet sort of a lot of architects in one place. And he basically said, "Come look me up," and I did.
Oh, that's so cool, and it's so funny because you said you work for this craftsman's architect, and that's also kind of connected to your latest book in BIG Form Giving. So it's kind of like a recurring topic. And how did BIG evolve since then till now? Because I imagine that in 2004, was it already BIG or was it still Plot? And you've seen this major evolution. How did you handle it along the journey, let's say?
Sure. So I actually officially started at BIG in 2006. I spent a year and a half or so just sort of studying the language and working to finally get to the point of seeing Bjarke and joining. And at that time, Bjarke had just opened up BIG a few months. Plot had been from 2001 to 2005. He and Julien had, of course, shared Plot. But by the time I started, I think there were probably about 30 people, mostly Danes, just a few foreigners. And we were working on almost all projects exclusively in Denmark, and even as close as just within the 100 kilometers of Copenhagen. And I started off as an architect. I worked on a couple of projects, both as support and also as project leader. It was kind of evident to me that one of the things that I could contribute to BIG and to Bjarke was my foreign experience of working in different countries. And I was also a licensed architect in America, so I could also look for work and do full service of work in the United States. So very early on in the first couple of years, I had expressed to Bjarke the real desire to kind of not only work on projects, but also to look for them, find them, hunt for them. And so I think Bjarke did see that sort of skill set and really supported it. And so I delved more and more into the business side of things, both client management, contractual kind of discussions, and really assembling teams, finding the collaborators that would make work really successful. And then, one of the most major things happened, which is the financial crisis. And suddenly all of the work that we were working on in Denmark and in Iceland suddenly stopped. And we had to start looking for work in a lot of different places.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question actually in architecture. What are the skill sets you need to hunt clients and to land one? Because I mean, you're some sort of I see you as one of the frontmen of BIG, because I guess there are a lot of partners at the company, but certain people are maybe more extrovert and we see them more often, and some others maybe not so much. But is that also your major soft skill, that you're very good with people? Because also you said you can build a team. And I'm curious, what are the skill sets that are required, and what is the method that you use to land the projects?
The $1 million question, right, Georgi? So I actually think I started in this way because I'm an only child. And when you're an only child, you don't have anyone in essence to have fun with or to play with. And so very early on, I would just go out into a neighborhood and start knocking on doors, whether I knew that they had children in there or not. And I would just ask, are there any children in that house? And then if they said yes, I would say, do they have time to play? And from that moment on, I think I was just on a path, on a journey to continuously knock on doors, to continuously to develop relationships. And I think for BIG and for myself personally, nothing is business, and nothing is. I generally don't use words like marketing or promotion because it's just about really making work and working on things that are some of the biggest challenges that we have in humanity, and solving, or at least contributing to solving some of those challenges. And it is just telling the stories. It's creating the narratives, and in many ways connecting the people that can make these things happen. And so that to me is, if that's called business development, then that's what it is. But to me, it's something that is just so inherent in how we go about looking for things, and both proactively, but also dealing with things as they arise. So it's very much just a kind of an attitude.
No, but in the case of BIG, I think the marketing, it's like the projects itself, because they're all so particular and interesting, and they're built through a story. So the way they're designed, it's built through a process, a mental process that creates the story. So I think that they're very self-explanatory in a way, and I mean, you often present them, and also there are plenty of videos out there of Bjorke presenting the project. So yeah, and you mentioned this going out for more work in other areas in the world. One thing is that through different cultures and through different continents, there are also different tastes, so to say. So how do you guys at BIG manage to be relevant in China, in America, in Europe? What is your approach to match what is the need of the client that you guys have?
Yeah, I think it's so when that happened, the financial crisis, and we needed to deal with it in 2008. I would say that that again, many people would probably deal with any kind of a crisis, say the pandemic crisis that we've just all been through, or the current economic challenges, and perhaps in a way look for all of the things that aren't happening, or that you focus on the difficulties. And I believe one of the ways that Bjarke really tried to approach the act of design is very much yes is more, that you can actually also approach challenges with a positive attitude, and you could look for ways to leverage the effort into finding ways that bring people together. And so we actually grew as an office between 2008 and 2010, when many places actually retracted or laid people off. And I felt that what was happening was that we were in a way going out and connecting with different cultures, different societies, and we were trying to find those bridges. One great example is we were traveling in Azerbaijan, and what we didn't know is that 100 years before us, the Nobel brothers were traveling through Azerbaijan, and actually discovered oil, and were in many ways responsible for the first oil well, the first oil ship for transportation, and figuring out how to commodify this natural resource. And instead of just taking all of the money and pouring it back into Sweden or taking it out of the country, they instead invested it into the first hospitals, the first kindergartens, and the first sort of public amenities that Baku and Azerbaijan had seen. And so there's also a beautiful promenade around the bay in Baku, and that's also a legacy of the Nobel family. So when 100 years go by, and we show up and we tell everyone that we're from Scandinavia, their memory is of Scandinavians, the Nobel family, as wow, that's good. There's actually a lot of good that came out of the time that they spent here. And so suddenly we were associated simply by the fact of being from Scandinavia as actually doing good and thinking of the collective as opposed to the individual. And so they really wanted us to re-engage with a kind of public process, looking at the promenade, how to add to it, and to do different projects all around Azerbaijan. I thought this was an interesting way that you don't quite know how history might have happened, and how you relate to that history. It also begs that you really need to understand a place and do the research, and to truly understand the cultural kind of DNA of places. It also helps that BIG really is representative of so many countries. We have over, I think, 40 countries represented in our staff, and so we have a representative from so many different places that also serve to build those bridges, and to understand the cultural nuances from place to place.
And what is like the creative project process? Because I imagine in the earlier days, Big wasn't as big as in size of people. So maybe Bjorke could be very, very involved in every single project. Um, how does it look like now? Because you have an office in Copenhagen, an office in Barcelona, an office in New York. What is the creative process? There is a design lead that comes up with the ideas, and then the partners in charge review them, or what is more or less the structure at Big in that sense in the process of creating those cool projects you guys managed to do?
You kind of answered it when you said earlier that we are so many partners, where all the partners are stretched throughout the different offices, and in a way, I would say each of us complement others, and then collectively we also complement and support Bjarke, and so it is a process where and then also to realize that we have had these milestones where I remember Bjarke really insisting on that it's not only an architecture office, but that we also, uh, create a holistic design process that includes landscape, it includes planning, it includes engineering, and even down to the products. So this big leap idea of landscape engineering, architecture, and product design is really to, in a way, to deal with scale, deal with complexity, and then to get those resources and those specific skills into the office. So, the projects that you see behind me are representative of many of those different subsets kind of working together to create sort of a holistic whole. And so the partners in each of the offices are very responsible for the direction of these projects. Then, of course, we have incredibly talented and incredibly strong project leaders. When you start working on very complex projects, you need also a layer of project management and being able to manage that process, because it can go, sometimes you start an architectural project and it can take 10 years or longer to build. So suddenly you realize that you're going to actually be retirement age before you actually finish a project. And so you have to manage that process as well. Um, and, and, and then it's, you are at the end of the day as strong as the people. And so I think by attracting really, really talented people, really curious people that are continuously learning, that's how you get the best results.
And talking about, of course, making the great projects you guys managed to do, you need a great staff, a great team with a lot of talent. A lot of people that will listen to this or listening to this will and will be wondering what does it require to get to be one of the big stars. So what is the whether I don't know, maybe you're not directly involved into acquisition of new people at the office, but is there a certain quality or certain talent that people have to have? Because also sometimes when you go and visit the website of Big, or you see all these great projects that are very very high level, you get a little bit intimidated. So do you need only to be, I don't know, a great computational designer, or what other skill set can take you into Big?
Well, I actually happened to be early on in those first years in Copenhagen. I was leading the selection of interns that were coming into the office, and so I think it starts even at the level of the interns um, that you invite in, and some of those interns are now partners, like Daniel Sunlin, Joao Albuquerque, Hannah. Johansson is an associate. Other associates as well came from that kind of internship class. So I really feel that you have the ability at every stage to to present. And if you were to sort of ask what is the kind of the perfect kind of profile, I would very much say it's someone that's a generalist and someone who is as interested in the history of architecture and can speak about their designs or speak about any other people's designs. It's about putting forward strong ideas. It's about representing those ideas through different tools, and then we spend a lot of time also building physical models. So iterating and finding out through a lot of different kind of through a selective process which ideas percolate to the top. So what really separates someone from someone else is, I think, tackling as many of those things as possible, always knowing that there's room to learn. The beauty of our profession is that you're continuously learning, even at my age and at Bjarke's age, we're still adding a lot to how we work and how we have the creative process. There constantly new tools now with AI, both the written word as well as the visual language is going through another iterative change. So you're never sort of standing still. And if that's your personality and you're open to that, I think that's the kind of person. And again, being able to work in a team and communicate clearly are all really huge benefits to being able to be successful in a space like BIG. But what I also appreciate about BIG, and I've done this myself, is we're a large office, but we continuously start new offices, and those new offices are almost like pioneering events where 5 or 6 bigsters are starting a new place in London or starting a new place in Barcelona. We just 2 years ago started one in Shenzhen. This year we're looking at Los Angeles. So you still have the ability, even in this organization, to actually kickstart and start something from scratch, where you're not only doing the design work, you might be ordering paper and making sure the lights stay on and figuring out where the office space is, and so you're able to work with a lot of synapses and use a lot of parts of your brain and your physical abilities to start something. And I think that's what I've always found very, very exciting.
Yeah, I guess that once you're in, it gets easier, but it's like landing the project, right? After you landed the project, it's kind of easier. And I'm also curious, in itself, architecture, it's a very intensive process. At the basic level, it's already intensive, and doing it with these incredible shapes and corners and buildings that you guys design, it probably requires way more working, and also there are some stuff that needs to get done. Architecture is not like reading a book and writing an essay. It's a never-ending process. Creativity in general is like this. Is there also some ways that BIG tries to check the work-life balance of the people working at BIG, or are there some programs internally? I don't know, how does it work? Because I imagine doing competitions and doing projects requires intensive work for several weeks or months. Do you have guys some ways of steam off or balancing this kind of things?
Yeah, so I think it's extremely important to create the right balance, because you can't stay in a purely productive mode. All of us remember our own time in school, and we there are many things to actually, I think, concentrate on. Part of that is also the further kind of growth opportunities for people. So, we set aside time within each of the offices to help people learn new skills, or to teach each other skills. We call it Big School. People that are bigsters that know something, then are really encouraged to share it with others, so that you don't just silo off something. Ollie Thomas is a great example of this with the Archi Network, where he's sharing all of the tools and the secret sauce and everything from his experience with the larger community. And I think we encourage this not only for Ollie and to do it globally, but also we encourage it with any of the bigsters and themselves. That we also really take time to create sort of off time kind of social events. We every 3 years have historically gone on study trips where we take anyone who wishes in the office kind of on a subsidized trip to a different country and spend 10 days to get to know the architectural culture. And then I think it's really important also to create a space for people to have families. Many of us have newborns, and the needs of balancing a family life with a professional life is also very, very important. So I think these are all things that really encourage people to take a better time off and find the balance to continuously learn and not to be placed into a rut. And my hope is that BIG is a place that is that really is known for how much people are valued, and also that that there's a kind of investment in everyone to be their very, very best.
Yeah, and I think that there is a certain camaraderie created in the office, because also sometimes there are images on your social media where you guys party like crazy and do all this costume parties, burning mermaids and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. And what is your current working day at BIG look like? Because also last time we met in Frankfurt, you are constantly on this crazy schedule between not only meetings but between traveling continents and so on. So how does generally your days look like, and what are your tasks? Is it still this hunting project, or are you also hands-on on some projects?
Sure. So I mean, it certainly, with the opening of the Shenzhen office, it now means that the sun never sets on any sort of big office. There's always an office open somewhere around the world, and that of course means that there are always decisions that need to be made, and people that are expecting some input. So it's true that there are a few of us that work globally. I work globally between the offices, and therefore I need to spend a little bit of time each day to look after all of those different needs. But for the most part, I would say for good 90% of bigsters, they're dealing with just the needs of their office and of their kind of region. And so I would say for the most part, I may be the exception. And I used to travel a lot more pre-COVID than I do now. So I don't ever see returning back to the way that it was, because of being able to have and hold a conversation like this online. Before, it might have been in the studio of your of you, and it would have been in person. And so I do see that the post-COVID world is really allowing us a lot more relaxedness and different tools and opportunities to create a less harried life of being in airports and hotels and curtsying about. But that doesn't mean that we work in over 40 different countries globally, and that doesn't mean that clients don't want to see you or you don't go on a site visit. Those still have to happen. And if we are to work in as many places in the future, we're still going to get around and to see and meet people. That's again at the core of every project, is that you understand the needs and the challenges of that very sort of local condition. But I think we're gonna continuously take advantage of online and in-person tools to make that happen.
No, definitely. Was a great. Actually, that was the moment where I decided to start this podcast, because usually people would expect to meet in person, and then it's when it started being common to be more open to do something online. And one question also is, how do you, as an organization that it's now so big, it's so funny that the name is big and everything around it, it's also like that, to embrace these new tools, this constant innovation. Because I know that once you get big as an organization, it's very hard to move. Like you're getting like a giant, you're not that agile anymore. Do you have some internal team that it's only focused on testing all these new tools? Also, you mentioned before Oli, who I know personally, and we became kind of friends through the podcast and everything. And so I know that also he works a lot on innovative stuff in the realm of AR, VR, BIM, computational design.
Yeah.
So do you also have constantly some experimental teams in the office that are exploring what are the new things in the world?
Yeah. So you should know that I started watching the Creative Insider also during COVID. And I think like many of us, we were looking for new ways to access information. And so when you started to post, and it was very interesting conversations, I started to listen. So I think, that's where I think that these shocks to the system, like the pandemic, really creates a lot of ripple effects that we'll see in a few years when we look back. Were really, really important. There's the negative side of COVID for sure. But then out of that, there could again be some things that actually are quite positive for the profession. I think that another kind of COVID related story is just that maybe about a month or two before the pandemic, our IT department had decided to install Teams into each of our computers. And we were always saying that there was no way for us to communicate effectively, beyond our telephones, calling each other. And we were kind of wondering, wasn't there some kind of virtual kind of means to have a conference call where we could also design and draw? And so our IT department investigated these over a couple of months, and they chose Teams. And so it was on everybody's computer, but no one had ever actually tried it out because there was no impetus to, right? There was no one that actually just said, let's have the next phone call on Teams. And so then the pandemic happened, and from one day to the next, we were from the office to our homes here in New York. And we had a crash course, I remember, on the second day on how to use Teams. And now you can't even imagine, our professional lives without these virtual Zoom or Teams or any other way of actually holding these kind of larger conversations. And I still think that they still have room for improvement. There could be a lot more visual tools that could be connected to it. But just imagine if we didn't have those digital tools, how much harder it would have been to create the spaces for each other to do what we do. We discovered that the creative process is really hard to do virtually and in many different locations. So, we insisted really on bringing people back into the office and being able to work together and help each other, mentor each other, so it's really, again, it's a balance of both the physicality and being with each other, and the humanity of that, as well as taking advantage of the new technological tools.
I agree with that. I agree that in the earlier phases of a project, especially when a creative process is going on, where you need to exchange a lot of ideas and actually, as you said, sit together, and it's very easy to sketch together, think together. You need this closeness. But I think that in further phases of the project, when it's more about, I don't know, if you're in doing construction documentation, or if you are working closely, but with people that are not you're not working really together with people that are with you anyways, because maybe you work with some consultant, or maybe you work with somebody that's on the construction side. I think that then this flexibility might get a little bit looser, and then you can also work remotely, in my opinion. And I think that certain offices stay too rigid.
And I'll just answer your other technological question. I think it's, of course, the tools of the trade for architects. But I think we're just as interested in also how construction is changing, and the whole kind of interest in 3D printing, and what that means, both for bringing the cost of construction down, as well as doing things like actually designing the first habitat on the moon, that you could actually, think that kind of far out to send up a printer and then use the regolith or the moon dust as your building material. I think that's, again, a way for architects to future-proof themselves.
Yeah, that's also like the next thing will be exactly this, to work to work on other planets, and on the moon. Maybe someday we'll have a big Mars or something like that. That would be very interesting to see. And it's very exciting to see your project, guys. I also read you had also your interview in detail. The magazine was super interesting to see, and you also collaborate with the company Icon. So very excited to see how this kind of technology is gonna develop. Do you have a lot of actually a lot of now to actually, I want to ask one question about this space architecture, because I'm curious, because it's my thing. People might think that it's a lot of engineering. Do you have a lot of consultancy and work together with space engineers in order to figure out how to build these new designs?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is not something that you are born with, and all of the rules that are in the Neufert kind of design guidelines, you can just chuck out the window, because you're in zero gravity or near zero gravity environments. So it is something that you have to realize. There are some space agencies out there like NASA that have been designing capsules and rovers and landing modules, and they've been doing that since the 50s and 60s. So there are quite a lot of people that have dedicated their entire lives to designing in those kinds of environments. What we then offer is somewhat of a naivete, coming at it with a fresh set of eyes, but we also take that role very seriously, and partners like Jakob Lange in Copenhagen, Martin Vökle here in New York, Jason Wu, an associate also here they all are working quite, I would say very, very much at sort of coming to the essence of what is important. It perhaps is important to, in some ways, simulate the daylight and the night light on Earth, so that humans that are suddenly working in a lunar environment are still able to work with the sort of the cycles that they're used to or have grown up with. It could also be that suddenly you have nothing to sort of hold you to the ground, so suddenly the section becomes something that's it can be twice or three times as high, because you can reach the top shelf on the second story just as easily as the bottom shelf on the first story. So, there are just different ways of sort of starting to think about space. And that, I think, is also very, very exciting when you start to have new parameters to design to. And so we work very closely with the NASA folks. There's also other specialist firms that we've also worked together with on any of these pursuits.
No, it's very exciting indeed. I'm looking forward to see what the outcomes of these designs and projects will be. I would start asking you a couple of questions from the audience. So Luka Popovic is asking if you guys have a dedicated 3D visualization team within the offices, or you rely on external visualization companies because all the stuff that comes out, graphics from BIG are so beautiful. So that's one of the questions was asked.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. It's actually the honest answer is both. We have visualization teams that really specialize and have that as their kind of primary skill. We all hope to and are able to kind of create certain visualizations, but then the sheer volume of work that has to be produced also limits us sometimes, and we use an outsource working with others. It's funny, we've been around now for I would say 20 years plus between Plot and BIG. And so there have been a lot of people also that have been Bigsters and then have gone on to start their own companies. So some of the Bigsters that have gone off have also started visualization companies, like Bucharest Studio is one that we use. And so it's you're still working with Bigsters, but just in a different facet. And over 2,000 people have actually worked at BIG and have now either started their own firms or are working in other firms. So it's a fairly large group of people that have all come and worked with BIG in some form or fashion.
Yeah, also so funny because the world is small, right? Because I got to know the guys from Bucharest Studio through this podcast too. So yeah, I can imagine that working in such a innovative environment as BIG will generate other companies, like for example Remcolas was for then the earlier generation. And then there is one question that is kind of related to this one from Apostolia. She asking if diagrams versus visualizations, which of the two has the potential to describe a concept to the clients? I guess also both.
Yeah, I think it's really a good question, in that who is your client? Is your client the one that's paying the bills, or is your client the citizens at large? Because maybe a public project actually is going through a public approvals process. I think that there is a need for both. It's not an either or. What diagrams do is that they take often very complex information and they break it down so that it is manageable. It is you can basically take them step by step and help them understand and break down the essence of a project. And so diagrams have always played a very important role, but I think sometimes people think of the diagram as simplifying projects, which is not their intent. Their intent is really to communicate quite complex, quite large amounts of information in a digestible sort of way, and I think that is also when you peel all the layers back on any of these projects, there's a lot there, and diagrams cannot communicate everything. They communicate sort of the larger brushstrokes, and then renderings, in some way also don't tell everything, and that's why we also use models so much, because models help to again communicate space, section, building systems in a way that renderings sometimes have a hard time to do, or diagrams certainly don't do. So you got to use everything at your in your arsenal, in your quiver.
And we have another one. It's good quality architecture versus marketing. What of these two is the decisive factor of running a successful architecture firm in 2023? So if, because also guys, you are also very represented in many movies, in many, I mean, it's kind of becoming iconic through the Netflix show Abstract too. So what is more important, architecture, great architecture, or also marketing?
So again, we don't use the word marketing. So I wouldn't actually say it's that we move that way. I think you should always focus on the work that you do, and good architecture communicates. So I think first and foremost, that is what we aspire to do, is to make really great architecture, very holistic architecture, where landscapes and the extension of buildings into the landscape are as thoughtful as the spaces inside. And that all of these things take time. They don't just happen overnight. So many of these projects are years, both in the conceptualization and in their execution. I think when I would say one of the challenges of social media is that you're trying to communicate years worth of work in a few short photographs, or in less than a paragraph of text. And I really encourage everybody, rather than believing everything that you see in social media, is to actually just go and see it, experience it, make some sketches, write a story or several paragraphs about what you've experienced. That's how you really get to the essence of a project.
Yeah, and we have one last one from the audience. Apparently, there has been distributed information about the master blueprint for the planet, designed by Björk Ingels. There is this sort of master plan for the whole planet, or master blueprint. If you can briefly explain what is it and how can people contribute to it, maybe.
Yeah, it's actually Bjarke has given a couple of talks. I think there was a recent one in Napoli, and you can Google "Plan for the Planet" and Bjarke and maybe Naples, and you can see it there. It's a little bit over 2 hours, where Bjarke really delves into. We are at a point where we are aware of the crisis and of climate change. We also are at a point where data is accessible, and we can actually quantify some of these needs, both in terms of where the biggest polluters are, or where you could make the biggest changes. And with regards to actually knowing something, and also technologies that have already been approved and are incorporated, making those technologies accessible to as many people as possible, we can and should start to implement and to share knowledge. So it's really a knowledge sharing kind of idea, and the hopes of it are in a way to create a little bit of perhaps a Wikipedia of knowledge sharing at the scale of the planet. We have heard of plans for a neighborhood, maybe planning for a street, planning for a city, planning even for a region. Maybe what we should also be considering is the planning for the planet, so that when the sun shines in one part of the globe, it could be producing energy in the part of the globe that is in darkness. When it's windy in one location, maybe that could help the areas that have no access to wind power. So just as you have national energy grids, maybe there's also a possible conversation about sort of international alliances that would allow for a more efficient use of our natural resources, such as sunlight, wind, air, wave, motion. So it's really a hope that with knowledge, we can address the challenge.
Yeah, that's. I think it's much needed for the future of our planet. Well, Kai, I know that you have a very tight schedule as usual, as I mentioned during the podcast. So I want to thank you very much for the time you gave us to answer the questions, because it's very nice, and always it's a great pleasure to discover more of great companies like BIG from the people that are behind the scenes. And I always say this to every guest: you are the first time on the Creative Insider, but it doesn't have to be the last one. So you're always welcome back to explain some news, or also other partners. Bjorky itself, very welcome, everybody. And thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you, Georgi, and definitely we're always interested to communicate with you, and it would be great if some other bigsters could speak in the future.